The vial slipped from Arabella's trembling fingers, and for one infinite moment, both she and Sebastian lunged for it, their hands colliding in midair as the glass tumbled toward the stone laboratory floor. 3 days. She had 3 days left to live, and that vial contained the only cure in existence. His eyes met hers, wide with the same terror, the same desperate mathematics. 1 vial, and 2 people poisoned. The glass vial hit the floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we continue, if you're already hooked on Arabella and Sebastian's impossible choice, show some love by hitting that like button, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this story with someone who adores historical romance with a twist. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Now, let's go back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, on a night that would change everything. The Midsummer Ball at Greyston Manor was the event of the season, though its host had a reputation for despising such affairs. Sebastian Ashford, Duke of Greyston, was known throughout London as the Hermit Duke, a man who'd inherited his title 18 months prior and promptly disappeared into his estate, emerging only when social obligation demanded it. Tonight was one such night. Arabella Thornwell stood at the edge of the ballroom, her gloved hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. She'd perfected the art of appearing engaged while her mind raced elsewhere. Around her, debutantes giggled and gossiped, their futures stretching endlessly before them like ribbons of silk. Arabella's future had an expiration date. "You're doing that thing again," Cordelia Hartley whispered, linking her arm through Arabella's. "The one where you press your fingers to your wrist." Arabella immediately dropped her hand. She'd been counting heartbeats again. 147 since she'd entered the ballroom. Each one a small victory against the poison slowly crystallizing in her veins. "I'm simply tired," Arabella said, forcing a smile. "Lord Pemberton insisted I attend tonight. Something about maintaining appearances." Cordelia's expression soured at the mention of Arabella's guardian. "That man would insist you attend your own funeral if it meant networking opportunities. Speaking of which, have you seen our elusive host? They say he hasn't spoken to a single guest. He just broods by the windows like some gothic novel reject." Arabella had seen him. Sebastian Ashford was impossible to miss. Tall, dark-haired, with a kind of face that suggested he was perpetually solving complex equations in his head. But what caught her attention wasn't his appearance. It was the way he kept glancing toward the ornate clock above the fireplace, as if willing time to move faster. She understood that feeling intimately. "The Duke can brood all he likes," Arabella murmured. "I'm more interested in his conservatory." "His what?" Cordelia asked. "Nothing. Excuse me, Cordelia. I need some air." Arabella slipped through the crowd with practiced ease, her heart rate climbing. 163. 164. She had perhaps an hour before her next episode, the tremors that started in her hands and spread through her body like frost on glass. She needed to be far from prying eyes when it happened. More importantly, she needed to be in the Duke's conservatory. For 6 months, she'd been mapping the great houses of London, searching for one specific plant. Dendrobium purpureum nocturne, a rare orchid she'd found illustrated in a medical journal stolen from Lord Pemberton's study. The journal had been ancient, filled with notations in Latin and Greek, but one passage had been underlined so many times the paper had worn thin. The purple night orchid, when properly distilled, provides the only known counteragent to compound V12. Arabella had nearly wept when she'd read it. She'd spent 3 weeks researching which estates might have such a rare specimen. The Duke of Greyston's late father had been a physician and an amateur botanist. If anyone in London possessed a Dendrobium purpureum nocturne, it would be him. She found the servant's entrance exactly where her source had indicated, a footman she'd befriended who'd worked at Greyston until recently. The door was unlocked, as it always was during balls to facilitate kitchen staff movement. Arabella slipped inside, her soft slippers silent on the stone floors. The conservatory was at the east end of the manor, through a maze of corridors that smelled of beeswax and old money. Arabella had committed the route to memory. Left at the portrait of the 3rd Duke. Right past the library. Straight through the morning room. She was halfway there when she heard footsteps. Arabella pressed herself into an alcove, barely breathing. A servant passed, carrying a tray of champagne glasses. She waited until the footsteps faded, then continued. Her hands were beginning to shake. "Not now," she prayed. "Please, not now." The conservatory doors were locked, but Arabella had prepared for this. From her reticule, she withdrew a slender pick, a gift from a former pickpocket who now worked as a maid in Lord Pemberton's house. It took 3 tries, her trembling fingers making the work difficult, but the lock finally clicked. The conservatory was a cathedral of glass and moonlight. Rows upon rows of exotic plants filled the space, their leaves silver in the darkness. Arabella lit a small lamp she'd brought, keeping the flame low. She had perhaps 20 minutes before the Duke retreated from his own ball. He always did at midnight, according to her research. She began searching systematically. Ferns, roses, succulents from Africa, but no orchids. Her heart sank. Had she been wrong? Then she saw it, a door at the far end of the conservatory, barely visible behind a curtain of hanging vines. It was marked with a small brass plaque, Private, E.A. Edmund Ashford, the late Duke's initials. Arabella's pulse thundered in her ears. 203. 204. She approached the door and found it locked as well, but this lock was more complex. She worked the pick carefully, her entire body now trembling with effort and the early stages of an episode. The lock gave way. Behind the door was a smaller room, temperature-controlled and humid. And there, arranged on a single shelf like crown jewels, were 6 pots of the most beautiful orchids Arabella had ever seen. Deep purple petals that seemed to absorb light. Stems that curved like dancers' arms. Dendrobium purpureum nocturne. She could have sobbed with relief. Instead, she withdrew a small knife and began carefully cutting a single stem from one plant. "You've been remarkably consistent, Lady Thornwell." Arabella spun, the knife clattering from her numb fingers. The Duke of Greyston stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, dark and intense, were fixed on her shaking hands. "Every fortnight, precisely at midnight," he continued, his voice soft but edged with something dangerous. A naturalist might admire such punctuality in their specimens. Arabella's mind raced, searching for excuses, but her body betrayed her. The tremors worsened, spreading up her arms. She pressed her back against the shelf, trying to hide it. Sebastian took a step closer. "You're afraid. Of me or of being caught, I wonder?" "Neither," Arabella managed, though her voice shook. "I'm simply, you're dying." The Duke completed for her. The word hung between them like a guillotine blade. Arabella's breath caught. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Show me your arms then," he said. "Absolutely not. Show me your arms, or I summon the constable for theft." His tone wasn't cruel, just inflexible. "Your choice, Lady Thornwell." Arabella's vision blurred at the edges. The episode was coming faster than usual, triggered by panic. She had perhaps minutes before she collapsed entirely. If he called the authorities, if this became public, Lord Pemberton would have her committed to an asylum before dawn. With trembling fingers, she peeled back her left glove. The violet tracery beneath her skin was unmistakable in the lamplight, delicate lines spreading from her wrist like poisonous lace. In the darkness of a ballroom, they might be mistaken for shadows, but under direct light, they were damning. Sebastian's face drained of all color. He stared at her wrist as if it were a ghost. "Dear God," he whispered. "I didn't think it was actually real. I don't understand." He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides and caught her wrist, gently, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away. His fingers found her pulse point. His eyes closed. "Your heartbeat," he said quietly. "Irregular. Approximately 180 beats per minute. The tremors started in your extremities and are spreading centrally." He opened his eyes, and Arabella saw something devastating in them. "How long have you had these symptoms?" "Sir, I must insist you release me." "How long?" he pressed. The authority in his voice startled her into honesty. "They began when I was 6. Mild at first. They've worsened each year." "And how old are you now?" 24. My birthday is in 3 weeks. Sebastian's grip on her wrist tightened fractionally, then released. He stepped back, running both hands through his dark hair. June 21st. The summer solstice. How could you possibly know that? Because that's when it activates fully. He looked at her with something like horror. You have 3 weeks to live, Lady Thornwell. And I know why. The conservatory tilted. Arabella reached for the shelf to steady herself, but her legs were giving out. Sebastian caught her before she fell, supporting her weight with surprising gentleness. Easy, he murmured. The episode will pass. Breathe slowly. Count your breaths, not your heartbeats. How do you know all this? Come with me, please. His voice cracked on the last word. There's something you need to see. Arabella should have refused. She should have turned heel and ran. But there was something in his expression, grief and guilt and desperate recognition, that made her nod. He helped her through the conservatory, supporting most of her weight, and led her to a section of the manor she hadn't explored. Down a narrow staircase. Through a door hidden behind a bookshelf in what appeared to be a study. Behind it was a laboratory. Not the clean, organized space of a modern physician, but something older and more sinister. Glass vessels filled with preserved specimens. Shelves of journals bound in cracked leather. And on the far wall, a cabinet with 50 small drawers, each labeled with a number. V01 through V50. Sebastian guided her to a chair and lit several lamps. The laboratory filled with harsh yellow light. He moved to the cabinet and withdrew a leather journal from drawer V17. My father, Sebastian said quietly, was Edmund Ashford. Physician to the aristocracy. Respected. Celebrated. He opened the journal, his hands shaking now too. But he was also a monster. He placed the journal in Arabella's lap. Her vision was still swimming, but she could make out the handwriting. Subject V17. Female, acquired age 6 from Ashworth House Orphanage. Initial compound V12 administration. Successful. Subject shows no adverse reactions. Beginning longitudinal study. The words swam. Arabella turned the page. Year 1. Subject remains healthy. Minor tremors noted. Within expected parameters. Year 5. Tremors increasing. Violet subdermal discoloration appearing. Excellent progression. Year 10. Subject has been placed with Lord P as requested. Continued monitoring through quarterly reports. Compensation received. Lord P, Arabella whispered. Pemberton, she realized. Sebastian nodded grimly. Keep reading. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pages, but she forced herself to continue. Year 18. Subject approaching final stage. Termination date projected. Age 25, summer solstice. Antidote has been successfully cultivated but will not be administered. Long-term effects data too valuable to compromise. The journal slipped from her fingers. You were one of 50, Sebastian said, his voice hollow. Orphans. Children no one would miss. My father used you to test a poison he developed, compound V12. A slow-acting toxin designed to kill precisely on schedule. Why would he do such a thing? The word came out as a breath. Because someone paid him to perfect it. Sebastian's jaw clenched. An undetectable poison that could be administered to inconvenient heirs, ensuring fortunes could be redirected before they came of age. The perfect murder weapon for patient men. Arabella's mind reeled. The kind doctor at the orphanage. The special vitamins that made her important to science. The way Lord Pemberton had appeared from nowhere to adopt her when she turned 12, then promptly ignored her existence except to control her social calendar. The others, she managed. The other 49. Dead. All of them. Sebastian crouched before her chair, his eyes level with hers. You're the only one who made it past 20. My father's notes call you Subject V17, showing unprecedented resistance. You weren't supposed to survive this long. The tremors were subsiding now, as they always did, leaving her exhausted and hollow. And the orchid? Dendrobium purpureum nocturne. My father cultivated it as an antidote, but he never used it. He wanted to see what happened if the poison ran its full course. Then why keep it at all? Sebastian's expression turned bitter. Insurance. In case he accidentally poisoned himself during his experiments. The notebooks are very clear. The orchid extract is the only counteragent to compound V12. Arabella absorbed this, her mind working through the implications even as her body screamed for rest. Your father is dead. 18 months ago. Heart failure, the physicians said. Sebastian stood and began pacing. I inherited Greyston and discovered this laboratory 6 months ago. I've been trying to locate any survivors, but my father used coded names. No real identities. Why not destroy it all? The poison, the research. Because I didn't know if anyone was still alive. He turned to face her. If there was even one survivor, they would need the antidote. So I've been cultivating more orchids, preparing extracts, waiting. His voice cracked. I've been hoping and praying I'd find someone. Anyone. And hating myself for hoping, because it meant someone was suffering. You've been watching me, haven't you? Arabella said slowly. The other times I came. For 3 months. I kept thinking, what if she's just a thief? What if I'm wrong? He laughed bitterly. But tonight, when I saw your wrist, subject V17, the one who survived, you were right here in London, dying, while I sat in my library feeling sorry for myself. Arabella's thoughts crystallized around a single, desperate point. The antidote. You have it. Yes. Enough for 50 people, if needed. Relief flooded through her so intensely she nearly wept. May I have it? It requires 2 weeks to prepare properly. The extract must be distilled at precise temperatures, combined with specific compounds in exact ratios. Rushing the process renders it useless. He met her eyes. You have 3 weeks. We have just enough time. I'm sorry, we. Sebastian knelt before her chair again, and this time she saw past the guilt to something fiercer beneath. My father's crimes are not mine to carry, but his debts are mine to pay. Every luxury I've enjoyed, every privilege of this title, purchased with the suffering of children. With your suffering. He took her hand carefully, avoiding her wrist. Let me help you. Please. Let me do this one decent thing. Arabella studied his face, the sharp angles, the shadows under his eyes, the desperate sincerity. She'd spent 18 years trusting no one, relying on nothing but her own cunning to survive. But she was so tired. And time was running out. What do you need from me? She asked quietly. Stay at Greyston Manor. The preparation process requires constant monitoring. I'll need to check your vitals daily, adjust the formula based on your specific physiology. I can't simply move into a bachelor's residence, Your Grace. The scandal would be a grave one. Then move in, not as a guest, but as my betrothed. The words hung in the air between them. You cannot be serious, Arabella said faintly. Society permits an engaged woman to reside in her future husband's home with proper chaperonage. Any other arrangement would destroy your reputation. His grip on her hand tightened. I'm offering you a business arrangement, Lady Thornwell. 3 weeks of playing the devoted couple. In exchange, you live. And what do you gain from this arrangement? Something painful flickered across his features. The knowledge that I didn't let you die. That some small part of my father's legacy was redemption instead of ruin. It was mad. Impossible. She'd be binding herself to the son of the man who'd poisoned her, trusting him with her life when trust was a luxury she'd never been able to afford. But the alternative was death. If I agree, Arabella said slowly, I have conditions. Name them. First, this engagement ends the moment I'm cured. No expectations beyond that. Agreed. Second, I want full access to your father's research. All of it. Every journal and every note. Sebastian hesitated, and she saw him warring with himself. Finally, he nodded. "All right, fine. I guess you deserve to know everything." Third, her voice hardened. "If this is some elaborate scheme, if you're working with Lord Pemberton or continuing your father's work, I will find a way to destroy you. I may die in the process, but I will make sure to take you with me." Instead of being offended, Sebastian smiled, a sad, tired expression. "If I betray you, Lady Thornwell, you have my permission to use that knife you dropped in the conservatory. Aim for the heart. I probably deserve it." Despite everything, Arabella found herself almost believing him. "Then I accept your proposal, Your Grace." "Sebastian," he corrected softly. "If we're to be engaged, you should call me Sebastian." "Arabella," she replied. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a feather-light kiss to her knuckles, carefully avoiding the violet-traced wrist. "Then we have an accord, Arabella. 3 weeks to undo 20 years of sin." As he helped her stand, Arabella felt the weight of her future shifting. A week ago, she'd been alone, slowly dying, with nothing but stolen orchid cuttings and desperate hope. Now she had an ally, a laboratory, and perhaps, if she was very lucky, a chance at survival. What she didn't yet know was that Sebastian was hiding something. In his father's journals, buried in the entries he hadn't yet shown her, was another notation. Subject V23, male, acquired age 8, transferred to private care age 12. SA. Ensure continuous monitoring. Sebastian Ashford had been one of the 52. The announcement of their engagement appeared in the Morning Post 3 days later, causing precisely the scandal Sebastian had predicted, though not for the reasons Arabella expected. The Hermit Duke emerges from his cave at last, Cordelia read aloud from the society pages, perched on the settee in Arabella's new chambers at Greyston Manor, and claims the season's most enigmatic wallflower as his prize. One wonders what magic Miss Thornwell employed to capture the attention of a man who has rebuffed every matrimonial scheme since inheriting his title. "It wasn't magic," Arabella murmured, measuring drops of orchid extract into a glass beaker. Sebastian had set up a secondary laboratory in her sitting room, complete with all the equipment she'd need to monitor her own treatment. It was proximity and convenience. "That's the least romantic thing I've ever heard you say." Cordelia set down the paper, her expression turning serious. "Bella, you know you can tell me the truth. Did Lord Pemberton force this match?" "Not at all," she said quickly. "Sebastian and I have an understanding. One that suits us both." The lie came easily now. She'd been practicing it for days. "An understanding," Cordelia repeated flatly. "Bella, you're marrying a man you barely know, moving into his home after a courtship of approximately 0 days, and I'm supposed to believe this is all perfectly normal." Before Arabella could answer, a knock sounded at the door. Sebastian entered without waiting for permission, a habit that would have scandalized her a week ago but now felt almost natural. "Your morning vitals," he said, already reaching for her wrist. His fingers were cool and professional as they found her pulse, his eyes tracking the second hand of his pocket watch. Heart rate elevated. "Have you eaten?" "Toast and tea," she admitted. "That's not sufficient." "I'll have the cook prepare." He paused, his thumb pressing slightly harder against her wrist. His eyes met hers, and she saw the flash of concern. "When was your last episode?" "Last night. A minor one." "How minor?" he asked. 15 minutes. Maybe 20 at most." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "You should have woken me." "At 3 in the morning? Hardly proper, Your Grace." "We are past propriety, Arabella." He released her wrist but didn't step back. "If the episodes are increasing in frequency, then you should let me know." "They are not." It was the stress of the announcement. All those eyes, all those questions. She gestured at Cordelia, who was watching this exchange with undisguised fascination. "Case in point." "I should go," Cordelia said, standing. "Give you 2 lovebirds some privacy." "Cordelia," Arabella started. "It's fine, I understand perfectly. Secret married people things." She gathered her reticule and gloves, but paused at the door. "Bella, whatever this really is, please be careful. You look at him like you're trying to solve a puzzle, and he looks at you like he's trying to prevent a catastrophe." When she was gone, silence filled the room. Sebastian moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "She's perceptive," he said finally. "She's my only real friend. I hate lying to her. The truth would put her in danger." He turned to face her. "Pemberton can't discover what we're doing." "Speaking of which..." Arabella set down her beaker carefully. "I've been reading your father's journals. The ones you gave me access to. Did you find something?" Sebastian asked with a raised brow. "Not quite. They're incomplete. There are references to other notebooks, other subjects, particularly subjects V20 through V30. But those journals aren't in the drawers." Sebastian's expression shuttered. "My father may have destroyed them. Or hidden them." Arabella studied his face, noting the tension in his shoulders, and the way he wouldn't quite meet her eyes. "You're keeping something from me." "I'm keeping many things from you. The full details of my father's experiments are..." "I don't mean the experiments," she interrupted, crossing over to him, close enough to see the faint shadows under his eyes. "You haven't slept. You spend every night in the laboratory, and when I ask what you're working on, you deflect. What aren't you telling me?" For a moment, she thought he might confess. His mouth opened, then closed. "Finally," he said, "the antidote preparation is more complex than I initially indicated. I'm simply being thorough." It was a lie. Arabella knew it in her bones. But before she could press further, Sebastian's butler appeared in the doorway. "Your Grace, Lord Pemberton has arrived. He's waiting in the drawing room and insists on speaking with Miss Thornwell immediately." Arabella's stomach dropped. "I'll need a moment to get ready." Sebastian's hand caught her elbow. "I won't let you go alone. We see him together, as a united front. He's my guardian. He'll expect privacy." "I don't particularly care what he expects." Sebastian's voice went cold in a way Arabella had never heard. "This is my home, and you're under my protection now. He doesn't get to summon you like a servant." The fury in his tone surprised her, but there was something else beneath it, something protective and possessive that made her pulse quicken for entirely different reasons than poison. They descended to the drawing room together, Sebastian's hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Lord Pemberton stood by the fireplace, his silver-topped cane tapping an irritated rhythm against the marble. "Arabella," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to speak privately." "Anything you wish to say to my fiancé can be said in my presence," Sebastian replied smoothly. Pemberton's eyes narrowed. "Your Grace, while I appreciate your enthusiasm for this match, there are matters of guardianship and finance that are now my concern," Sebastian finished for him. "Seeing as Arabella will be my wife in 3 weeks." 3 weeks? Pemberton gasped, his cane stopping mid-tap. "Surely such haste is unseemly. A proper engagement period of at least 6 months is unnecessary when both parties are in agreement." Sebastian moved to stand beside Arabella, a wall of aristocratic authority. "Unless you have some objection to your ward making an advantageous match." The air in the room crystallized. Pemberton's gaze flickered between them, calculating. "Of course not. I simply worry about Arabella's well-being. She has always been delicate, prone to spells of illness." "I'm well aware of her medical history," Sebastian said, and Arabella heard the edge beneath his polite tone. "In fact, I've taken a personal interest in her treatment." Something dangerous flashed in Pemberton's eyes. "Have you indeed? How fascinating. And what precisely have you discovered?" "That she requires rest, proper nutrition, and freedom from unnecessary stress." Sebastian's smile didn't reach his eyes. "All of which I can provide far better than a guardian who treats her as an inconvenient ward." "You presume a great deal, Your Grace." "I presume nothing. I simply state facts." Arabella watched this exchange like a tennis match, her heart hammering. Pemberton knew something. She could see it in the way his fingers tightened on his cane, the slight tightening of his mouth. But what? How much had Dr. Ashford told him? "Arabella," Pemberton said, turning his attention to her. "Are you quite certain about this match? You seem unwell. Perhaps we should discuss this when you're feeling more yourself." It was a test. Arabella recognized the particular tone, the one that usually preceded him making decisions for her own good. But she wasn't the frightened ward anymore, counting heartbeats in the corner of his study. "I've never been more certain of anything," she said clearly. "Sebastian has been nothing but kind and attentive. I'm grateful to have found such a partnership." Partnership. Pemberton repeated the word like it tasted sour. "How modern of you. I do hope you know what you're doing, my dear. The Duke's family has a rather complicated medical history." Arabella felt Sebastian stiffen beside her. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Oh, nothing untoward. Simply that the late Duke Edmund was obsessed with experimental treatments. One might even say dangerously so." Pemberton's smile was razor-thin. "I knew him quite well, you see. We shared certain interests. I'd hate for his son to have inherited any unfortunate tendencies." "My father's interests died with him," Sebastian said flatly, "as did his questionable associations." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Pemberton's expression hardened. "Very well. I can see I'm not welcome here." He turned toward the door, then paused. "But Arabella, do remember, you have 3 weeks until your birthday. Such an important milestone. I do hope you live to see it." The words landed like a knife between Arabella's ribs. Pemberton tipped his hat and left, his cane clicking against the floor in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. The moment the door closed, Sebastian rounded on her. "He knows." "That's impossible. You said your father used codes." "He funded the experiments, Arabella. He was my father's patron." Sebastian paced, agitation crackling off him in waves. "That comment about your birthday wasn't chance. He knows about the activation date." Arabella's mind raced. "If he knows, why hasn't he said anything? Why let me become engaged to you?" "Because he doesn't know I've discovered the laboratory. He thinks I'm ignorant of my father's work." Sebastian stopped pacing, his expression grim. "Which means he's planning something. The question is, what?" Before Arabella could respond, another knock interrupted them. The butler again, looking apologetic. "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but there's been an incident in the conservatory. You should come immediately." They ran. Arabella's skirts tangled around her legs as they raced through the corridors, Sebastian several paces ahead. When they reached the conservatory, she understood the urgency. The orchid room had been ransacked. Pots lay shattered on the floor, soil and shredded petals scattered like carnage. The careful arrangements Sebastian had spent months cultivating were destroyed. And on the shelf where 6 perfect Dendrobium purpureum nocturne plants had bloomed, only broken stems remained. Every single orchid was gone. Sebastian stood frozen in the doorway, his face drained of color. "Good God, no, this isn't happening." He moved into the room, his boots crunching on broken pottery. "The cuttings. Tell me he didn't." But the drawer where Sebastian kept the prepared cuttings stood open and empty. Arabella felt the world tilt. "The antidote, the extract you've been preparing, is still in the laboratory. That's safe." Sebastian's hands shook as he picked up a shattered pot. "But these plants took 3 years to mature. Even with the cuttings, I'd need at least 8 months to grow new ones to full potency." 8 months. Arabella's voice came out hollow. "I have 3 weeks. We have the extract I've already prepared. That's enough for your treatment." But his eyes told a different story. Worry, calculation, something darker. "Sebastian." Arabella caught his arm, forcing him to look at her. "What aren't you telling me?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he rolled up his sleeve. The violet tracery on his wrist was faint, barely visible in the conservatory's filtered light. But it was there. Arabella's breath stopped. You were an experiment too. My father poisoned me when I was 8. He told me it was medicine for my weak constitution. Sebastian's laugh was bitter. He used a variant formula. It was slower, designed to give him years of data. I have perhaps 5 years before it reaches critical stages. Maybe 10 if I'm fortunate. But the orchids were meant to treat us both. You first, because your timeline is immediate. Then me, once we'd perfected the process. He looked at the devastation around them. Now there's only enough extract for 1 treatment course. The implication crashed over Arabella like a wave. 1 cure, and 2 poisoned people. Then I won't take it, she said immediately. Don't be absurd. You have years, Sebastian. I have weeks. But years means you have time to find another solution, cultivate new plants, and watch you die in the meantime. His hands gripped her shoulders, not roughly but desperately. Absolutely not. We'll use the extract for your treatment. That's final. This isn't your decision to make alone. It's my laboratory, my antidote, and my father's crime to atone for. The words burst from him like a dam breaking. Every moment you suffer is because of my family. Because my father decided your life was worth less than his research. Because I was too blind and too caught up in my own grief to discover the truth sooner. His voice cracked. Let me save you, Arabella. Let me do this one thing right. Arabella stared at him, seeing past the Duke to the broken man beneath. The boy who'd been poisoned by his own father. The son carrying impossible guilt. We'll find another way, she said quietly. Together. There has to be. A sound from the doorway made them both turn. Sebastian's butler stood there, holding a cream-colored envelope. This was found pinned to the conservatory door, he said. Addressed to Miss Thornwell. Arabella took it with trembling hands. The handwriting was Pemberton's. She'd know it anywhere. Inside was a single card. My dear ward, it read. Such carelessness, leaving rare specimens unguarded. I've taken the liberty of relocating them to a safer location. If you wish to discuss their return, I'll be waiting at Pemberton House. Come alone, or I'll ensure every cutting burns. You have until midnight. Do choose wisely. Your devoted guardian, P. Sebastian read over her shoulder, and she felt him go rigid with fury. It's a trap, he said. Of course it's a trap. Arabella said, folding the note carefully. But he has the orchids. And without them, everything you've worked so hard for will be for nothing. Then I'll go. You stay here where it's safe. He specified me. Alone. If you appear instead, he'll just destroy them. All right, how about we go together and damn his conditions? Sebastian said in a cold voice. And risk him destroying the plants out of spite. Arabella shook her head. No, Sebastian. This is my life, my choice. I'm going. I'm not sure I can let you do that, he cried. You said we were partners in this. Equals. She met his eyes steadily. Then trust me to handle Pemberton. I've been managing him for 12 years. I know how he thinks. But that was before he committed felony theft and threatened your life. She shrugged. He's been threatening my life since I was 6 years old. I just didn't know it. Arabella's hands curled into fists. I'm not a helpless victim, Sebastian. I'm a survivor. And I'm going to survive this too. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then slowly, he nodded. On one condition. You wear this. He withdrew a small object from his pocket, a locket on a delicate chain. It was my mother's. Inside is a compass. If you need me, open it and point the needle north. I'll find you. It was absurd, romantic and ridiculous and completely impractical. But Arabella took it anyway, fastening it around her neck. Midnight, she said. I'll be back by midnight. You'd better be. Sebastian's fingers brushed her cheek, so gently she almost didn't feel it. Because if anything happens to you, Arabella Thornwell, I will burn Pemberton's entire estate to the ground and salt the earth where it stood." Despite everything, she smiled. "Such passion, Your Grace. People might think you actually care." "People," Sebastian said softly, "would be correct." The confession hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Then Arabella turned and walked away, the locket warm against her skin, counting heartbeats and wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. At Pemberton House, the clock struck 11. In the conservatory at Greyston, Sebastian stood among the ruins, and for the first time in 18 months, allowed himself to hope and fear in equal measure. And in a locked drawer of his study, hidden beneath false documents, lay the journal he hadn't shown Arabella. The one containing his father's final entry. Subject V23 shows unexpected resistance. Subject V17 shows unprecedented adaptation. Hypothesis: combined genetic material may produce immunity. Recommend breeding program if both subjects survive to maturity. Sebastian had found it 3 days ago, and had stared at those words until they burned into his brain. His father hadn't just poisoned them. He'd planned for them to marry, to create a next generation of test subjects. And Sebastian, in his desperation to save Arabella, had proposed exactly what his father had intended all along. Pemberton House loomed against the night sky like a mausoleum. Arabella had grown up in this building, but standing before it now, she realized she'd never truly seen it. Every window was a watchful eye. Every shadow concealed teeth. The door opened before she could knock. Pemberton's ancient butler, Morrison, stood in the entrance, his expression unreadable. "Miss Thornwell, Lord Pemberton is expecting you in his study." "I know the way, Morrison." "Of course you do, miss." The house was too quiet. Arabella's footsteps echoed on marble floors she'd walked 1,000 times, but tonight every sound felt amplified, dangerous. She counted her heartbeats, 206, 207, trying to steady herself. The study door stood ajar, lamplight spilling into the darkened hallway. Arabella pushed it open. Pemberton sat behind his desk, looking for all the world like a benevolent grandfather reviewing accounts. Behind him, arranged on shelves like trophies, were the stolen orchids. All 6 plants, perfectly intact. Arabella, punctual as always. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." "I'll stand. Where are the cuttings?" "How direct," he chuckled. "I've always admired that about you." Pemberton opened a drawer and withdrew a wooden box. Inside, wrapped in damp cloth, were the precious cuttings Sebastian had prepared. All here, perfectly preserved. "I'm not a monster, my dear. I simply needed to ensure we had this conversation without the Duke's interference. You destroyed his conservatory, stole his property. I'd say that qualifies as monstrous. Would you?" Pemberton's smile was thin. "More monstrous than a father who poisons his own son? Than a physician who experiments on orphans? I may be many things, Arabella, but at least I'm honest about what I am. You funded those experiments. Dr. Ashford's journals make that clear. So the Duke has been sharing his father's research with you." Pemberton leaned back, steepling his fingers. "How much has he told you, I wonder? Does he know that you're subject V17? Does he know what that designation means?" Arabella's pulse spiked. "It means I was one of 50 children you and Dr. Ashford tortured in the name of science." "No, my dear. It means you were one of 2 who survived long enough to matter." Pemberton stood, moving to the shelf where the orchids bloomed. Subject V17 and Subject V23. The only successes in a sea of failures. Edmund was quite proud of you both. The way he said both made Arabella's stomach turn. "Sebastian is V23. I see he's told you. How touching." Pemberton stroked one of the orchid petals with disturbing gentleness. "Did he also tell you why Edmund chose you specifically? Why you, out of dozens of orphans?" "Because we were convenient. Disposable. Because you were compatible." Pemberton turned, and the expression on his face was almost pitying. Edmund tested every child in that orphanage. Blood work, genetic markers, family histories traced back 3 generations where possible. He was looking for 2 specific things: subjects who would respond to compound V12, and subjects whose genetic material, when combined, might produce offspring with natural immunity. The room tilted. Arabella gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. "That's insane," she said. "That's science. Unethical science, certainly, but science nonetheless." Pemberton returned to his desk, withdrawing a leather portfolio. Edmund's ultimate goal wasn't just to create an undetectable poison. It was to create a bloodline that could survive it. Imagine the applications: assassins who could handle the compound without risk, soldiers immune to chemical warfare, a ruling class genetically superior to poison. He opened the portfolio, revealing pages of charts and diagrams. Arabella recognized the notations: genetic inheritance patterns, probability calculations, projected outcomes. Edmund spent 15 years tracking you and young Sebastian, documenting your responses, your resistance levels, your physiological adaptations. Pemberton's finger traced one of the charts. And then he did something unexpected. He started having doubts. "What do you mean, doubts?" she asked with a raised brow. "About the ethics of his work. About what he'd done to his own son." Pemberton's mouth twisted with disgust. He wanted to stop. Destroy the research. Administer the antidote and wash his hands of the whole enterprise. "So you killed him." The accusation hung in the air, but Pemberton didn't deny it. "I invested 20 years and a considerable fortune into that research." Edmund didn't get to simply walk away. He closed the portfolio with a snap. His death was unfortunate but necessary. Heart failure, so the physicians ruled. Completely natural for a man of his age and stress level. Except it wasn't natural at all. Arabella realized. "Prove it." Pemberton's smile was cold. "Edmund is dead. His research is incomplete. The only 2 surviving subjects are you and Sebastian, and you're both still dying. The perfect crime, really." Arabella's mind raced, piecing together the timeline. "You adopted me when I was 12, right after Dr. Ashford wanted to stop the experiments." Edmund insisted. Said if he couldn't save you all, he'd at least ensure you had comfortable lives. He found placements for several subjects before I stopped him. Pemberton's expression hardened. "I took you in to keep you close, to monitor your progress, and to ensure that when the time came, when you reached your activation date, I could control the outcome. By letting me die and inheriting my estate," she spat. "You never had an estate, my dear. Everything you think you own, it's mine. It has been since I adopted you. Your death simply makes it official." He gestured at the orchids. But then young Sebastian discovered his father's laboratory and started cultivating antidotes, getting inconveniently noble about redemption. "So you're destroying the cure to ensure I die on schedule?" "Not at all. I'm offering you a choice." Pemberton pushed the wooden box of cuttings across the desk. "These, plus the plants, represent enough raw material to cure 1 person. Maybe 2 if Sebastian is as brilliant as his father. But here's the beautiful irony. The antidote requires 2 weeks of careful preparation. You have 17 days until your birthday." The mathematics clicked into place with horrible clarity. "Even if we started tonight, there wouldn't be time to prepare enough for both of us," Arabella whispered. "Precisely. Which brings us to your choice." Pemberton leaned forward. "Marry the Duke. Take the antidote. Live. But know that in doing so, you condemn him to death within 5 years. Or, and this is where it gets interesting, refuse the antidote. Die on your 25th birthday, and I'll ensure Sebastian receives the cure instead." "You're mad," she cried. "I'm practical. Either way, one of Edmund's subjects survives. One set of genetic data remains intact, and I get to see which of you values your own life more than the others." His smile was genuinely delighted. "It's the perfect final experiment, don't you think?" Before you find out what choice Arabella makes, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who loves historical romance with deadly twists. Things are about to get even more intense. Now, back to the story. Arabella stared at the man who'd raised her, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a guardian. Not even a villain. Just a cold, curious observer watching subjects die for data. "There's a third option actually," she said quietly. "Is that so?" Pemberton scoffed. "Sebastian and I share the antidote. Half doses. Risk that it might not fully cure either of us, but at least we both have a chance." Pemberton actually laughed. How romantic. Also suicidal. Edmund's notes are very clear. Partial doses of the antidote are worse than no dose at all. They accelerate the poison's final stages. You'd both be dead within a week. Then we'll find another way. Synthesize more extract, locate other plants. With what time? What resources? Pemberton stood, gathering the orchids carefully. "You're welcome to try, of course. But every day you spend searching is a day closer to your activation date. And I promise you, Arabella, I will use every resource at my disposal to ensure you don't find what you're looking for." He carried the plants to a cabinet, locking them inside with a key he pocketed. The cuttings remained on the desk, close enough to touch but suddenly feeling infinitely far away. "I'm not giving you a choice out of cruelty," Pemberton continued. "I'm giving you a choice because Edmund would have wanted you to have one. He cared about you, in his own twisted way. So I'll honor that. Take the cuttings. Save yourself. Or leave them here, and I'll deliver them to Sebastian after your funeral with instructions for his cure. And if I refuse both options? If I take the cuttings and destroy them so neither of us can be cured? Then you're more spiteful than I gave you credit for. Which is also pointless. I have samples of the orchid secured elsewhere. You'd be destroying yourselves for nothing." Arabella looked at the wooden box. Such a small thing to contain so much weight. Life or death. Salvation or sacrifice. "I need time to think," she said. "You have until midnight tomorrow. After that, I take my offers off the table and let nature take its course." Pemberton returned to his desk, already dismissing her. "Morrison will show you out." "One question." Arabella's voice stopped him. "Why tell me any of this? Why not just let me die ignorant?" For the first time, something almost human crossed Pemberton's face. "Because Edmund's last words to me, as the poison I'd given him stopped his heart, would tell them the truth. I thought he meant his research. But perhaps he meant this, the choice, the stakes, the cost of survival." He met her eyes. "Consider it my gift to his memory. Cruel, perhaps, but honest." Arabella left Pemberton House with the wooden box clutched to her chest and a choice that felt like a noose around her neck. The night air was cold, biting through her cloak. She'd told Sebastian she'd be back by midnight. The clock tower showed 11:30. She had 30 minutes to decide if she was going to tell him the truth. The carriage ride to Greyston felt simultaneously too long and too short. Arabella's mind spun in circles, examining every angle, every possibility. There had to be another way. Had to be. But Pemberton's words echoed. 2 weeks to prepare, 17 days until activation. Enough material for one cure. The mathematics were pitiless. Sebastian was waiting when she arrived, pacing the entrance hall like a caged wolf. The moment he saw her, relief and fury warred on his face. Thank God. I was about to storm the Pemberton house with the entire household staff. He crossed to her, hands hovering as if afraid to touch her. Are you hurt? Did he do anything to you? I'm fine. He just wanted to talk. Arabella held up the wooden box. And to return these. Sebastian's eyes widened. The cuttings. He just gave them back. More or less, she sighed. Arabella, what happened in that house? She thought of telling him everything, the genetic compatibility, the breeding program, the impossible choice. But looking at Sebastian's face, seeing the hope kindling there at the sight of the cuttings, she couldn't form the words. He was trying to frighten me, she said instead. Make me doubt you. It wasn't technically a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. Sebastian studied her face, and she saw the moment he decided not to push. And what about the orchids? He kept them, locked away, but he has no use for them. He was just being petty. Another half-truth. We have the cuttings. That's what matters. Then we start the preparation tonight. Sebastian took the box, his shoulders straightening with purpose. I've already set up the equipment. With these and the extract I've been cultivating, we should have enough to complete your treatment with 2 days to spare. My treatment, Arabella repeated carefully. Of course. We discussed this. You have 17 days, I have years. The priority is clear. Sebastian. I won't hear arguments. He was already moving toward the laboratory, energized by having a concrete task. Come. I'll need your help with the initial extraction. Your blood chemistry is unique to you, so we'll need to calibrate the formula precisely. Arabella followed, her heart heavy with secrets. In the laboratory, Sebastian worked with fierce concentration, measuring and mixing, his hands steady despite the violet traces on his wrists. Pemberton said something, Arabella ventured as she watched him work. About your father having doubts near the end. About wanting to destroy the research. Sebastian's hands stilled. My father's journals from his final year are fragmented, filled with religious references, prayers for forgiveness. I thought it was the guilt finally catching up to him. What if it was more than guilt? What if he wanted to make amends? She suggested. Then he failed spectacularly by dying before he could. Sebastian's voice was bitter. Leaving me to clean up his mess, save his victims, atone for sins I didn't commit. You're not responsible for his choices. I'm not so sure about that. I lived in luxury while children died in agony. I benefited from blood money. He set down the beaker he'd been holding, gripping the edge of the laboratory table. And now I'm using his research, his methods, his poisoned legacy to save you. What does that make me? Human, Arabella said softly. It makes you human. Sebastian turned to face her, and the anguish in his expression nearly broke her. I can't lose you, Arabella. I know we barely know each other. I know this started as a transaction, a business arrangement. But somewhere between the laboratory and the lies we tell society, you became. He trailed off, searching for words. You became the first person in 18 months who made me want to live instead of just survive. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Arabella felt her resolve cracking. I need to tell you something, she began. But before she could continue, a sound shattered the moment, glass breaking, followed by shouting from the front of the house. Sebastian was moving before Arabella could process what was happening, sprinting toward the commotion. She followed, her skirts tangling, her heart hammering. In the entrance hall, 3 men in dark clothing were struggling with Sebastian's butler and footman. One of them held a torch. Fire! Someone screamed. Smoke was already billowing from the drawing room. Through the chaos, Arabella saw one of the intruders turn and run toward the east wing, toward the conservatory. The laboratory, Sebastian breathed. Then he was running, pushing through servants and smoke, Arabella right behind him. They reached the conservatory to find it already engulfed. Flames licked up the glass walls, fed by the dry plants and wooden shelving. The heat was overwhelming. The extract. Sebastian lunged forward, but Arabella caught his arm. It's too late. 3 weeks of work. Your only chance, he tried to pull away, but she held firm. It's not worth your life. For a moment they struggled, Sebastian desperate to reach the burning laboratory, Arabella desperate to keep him from immolating himself. Then part of the glass ceiling collapsed, sending a shower of burning debris between them and the laboratory. Sebastian sagged in her grip, watching everything burn. The cuttings, Arabella said urgently. We still have the cuttings from Pemberton. We can start over. In the laboratory, in a locked drawer. Sebastian's voice was hollow. Along with all my equipment, all my notes, everything we need to prepare the antidote. The words hit Arabella like a physical blow. The cuttings. The only remaining raw material. Gone. Behind them, servants were forming a bucket brigade, trying to contain the fire. But it was spreading fast, feeding on 18 months of Sebastian's botanical obsession. "This was Pemberton," Sebastian said quietly. "He didn't give you the cuttings back out of kindness. He wanted to make sure they were here, in the conservatory, when his men set the fire." "But why? What does he gain?" Arabella stopped, understanding crashing over her. "The orchids, the ones he kept, are now the only source of antidote in England, possibly the world." Sebastian's laugh was bitter. "Brilliant. He's ensured that we have to come to him. On his terms. For his price. There has to be another way. Other plants, other sources. Dendrobium purpureum nocturne is extinct in the wild. My father cultivated the last known specimens from seeds he acquired in Burma 30 years ago. Those 6 plants Pemberton has are probably the only ones left on Earth." Arabella watched the fire consume the conservatory, and with it, her hope. 16 days until her activation date. No antidote. No leverage. No options. Except Pemberton's choice, her life or Sebastian's. "We'll go back to Pemberton House tomorrow," Sebastian said, his voice dead. "We'll try to negotiate. Offer him money, property, anything he wants in exchange for the orchids." "He doesn't want money." "Then what does he want?" Arabella looked at Sebastian, brilliant, damaged, desperately trying to save her from his father's sins. She thought of Pemberton's cold smile, his careful calculations, his final experiment. "It's me," she said quietly. "He wants me to choose." "Choose what?" Sebastian asked. But before she could answer, another section of the conservatory collapsed in a shower of sparks and broken glass. And Arabella realized that sometimes there were no good choices, only impossible ones. And she had less than 16 days to make hers. The fire burned through the night. By dawn, the conservatory was a skeleton of twisted metal and shattered glass, still smoldering. Arabella stood in what had been the orchid room, with ash coating her nightgown, and tried to remember how to breathe. 15 days left. Sebastian hadn't slept. She could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the rigid set of his shoulders as he sifted through debris with his bare hands, searching for anything salvageable. His fingers were cut and blistered, but he didn't seem to notice. "Sebastian, stop. There's nothing left. There has to be something. A root system, a viable seed." He threw aside a piece of charred wood, coughing as ash filled his lungs. "I won't accept this. I won't. You don't have a choice." Arabella's voice came out harsher than she intended. "None of us do." He turned to look at her, and the desperation in his eyes nearly undid her. "Then what do you suggest? We simply surrender to Pemberton? And let him dictate terms?" "Yes," she said finally. The word hung between them like a guillotine blade. Sebastian stared at her as if she'd slapped him. "You can't be serious. He has the only cure. We have nothing. The mathematics are simple." Arabella forced herself to meet his gaze. "We go to him. We negotiate. We give him whatever he wants. And if what he wants is your death?" Sebastian asked. The question struck closer to truth than Sebastian knew. Arabella turned away, unable to maintain the lie while looking at his face. "Then at least one of us survives," she said quietly. "You have 5 years. Maybe more. That's time to find another solution, cultivate new plants, and synthesize alternatives." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the residual heat from the fire. "But I have 15 days. We both know which equation makes sense." Sebastian crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands gripping her shoulders, forcing her to face him. "I didn't pull you out of that orphanage shadow just to watch you walk back into the dark. I won't allow it. You don't get to allow or forbid anything. This is my life, my choice. It stopped being just your life the moment I fell in love with you." The confession crashed over them both. Sebastian's eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't meant to say it aloud. Arabella felt her heart stutter, skip, and then restart at a different rhythm. "You don't love me," she managed. "You love the idea of redemption, of fixing your father's mistakes. Don't tell me what I feel." His grip tightened, not painfully but urgently. "I know the difference between guilt and love, Bella. Guilt is what I feel when I read my father's journals. Love is what I feel when you challenge me, argue with me, and refuse to be the victim everyone expects you to be." His voice dropped to something raw and honest. "Love is knowing I'd burn this entire manor to the ground if it meant buying you one more day." Arabella's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "Then you understand why I can't let you sacrifice yourself for me." Sebastian gave a small, fleeting smile. "And you understand why I'll never let you sacrifice yourself for me." They stood locked in an impossible standoff, both willing to die for the other, neither willing to live at the other's expense. "There has to be another way," Sebastian said finally. "Something we're missing. Some solution we haven't considered." "Like what?" "Pemberton controls the only plants. Even if we stole them, we'd need weeks to prepare the extract properly. We don't have weeks." "Then we don't prepare it properly. We take shortcuts, accelerate the process. Your father's notes specifically say that rushing the preparation renders it useless, possibly toxic." Arabella pulled away from him, pacing through the ash. "Trust me, I've read every page a dozen times, looking for exactly that loophole. It doesn't exist." Sebastian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What if we're thinking about this wrong?" "What do you mean?" "My father spent 15 years perfecting compound V12, creating a poison that activates precisely on schedule, that's undetectable, that kills slowly enough to gather data." He moved to where a partially burned workbench still stood, pulling out a charred notebook. "But he also created the antidote, which means he understood the poison's mechanism completely." "Your point? What if we don't need to cure the poison? What if we just need to delay it?" Arabella's pulse quickened. "Keep talking." Sebastian flipped through the damaged notebook, his fingers tracing formulas. "The activation date isn't arbitrary. It's triggered by a specific physiological change. Hormonal, cellular, I'm not entirely sure. But if we could interrupt that trigger, postpone it even by a few weeks or months." Arabella gasped in understanding. "We'd buy time to cultivate new orchids. Synthesize proper extracts." Hope flared in her chest, dangerous and bright. "Is it possible?" "I don't know. My father's research focused on the poison and the cure, not on delay mechanisms. But the principle is sound. If we can identify what triggers the activation." He stopped, his expression shifting to something troubled. "What?" Arabella asked. "There's one person who might know, who helped develop the poison's timing mechanism." Sebastian met her eyes. "Pemberton." The hope guttered. "He'll never tell us." "Not willingly. But if only we had leverage." Arabella gestured at the ruins around them. "We have no leverage," he burned it all. "Unless you're suggesting we torture a lord of the realm for information, we're back to the same impossible choice." Before Sebastian could respond, footsteps crunched on broken glass. His friend James Whitmore appeared in the doorway, his usually impeccable appearance disheveled. Behind him was Cordelia, her face pale. "Thank God you're both alive," James said. "We just heard about the fire." He took in the destruction, his expression hardening. "This wasn't an accident." "No," Sebastian agreed. "It was very deliberate arson. Likely hired men, paid to ensure nothing survived." Cordelia moved to Arabella, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "You're freezing. And covered in ash. Come inside, both of you. You need rest." "What we need is information," Arabella interrupted. "James, you're a barrister. If someone wanted to extract a confession from another party, what would be the legal method?" James's eyebrows rose. "Are we talking about Pemberton?" "Hypothetically." "Then you'd need evidence of a crime. Witnesses. Documentation." He glanced between them. What exactly are we hypothetically accusing him of? Arabella and Sebastian exchanged looks. How much could they reveal without endangering James and Cordelia, and without sounding completely mad? He funded illegal medical experiments, Sebastian said carefully, using children from orphanages. My father was the physician conducting them. Pemberton was the financial backer. Cordelia's hand flew to her mouth. Dear God, do you have proof? James asked, his barrister mind already working. Journals, ledgers, all in my father's laboratory. Sebastian's jaw tightened, which conveniently survived the fire, almost as if someone knew exactly which part of the manor to avoid burning. That's not convenience. That's insurance. James began pacing, his mind clearly racing. If Pemberton has evidence of your father's crimes, he can use it to control you, threaten to expose the Ashford name, destroy your reputation. Unless we expose him first, Arabella said slowly. If we go public with everything, the experiments, the funding, the poison, we destroy any chance of getting the orchids, Sebastian finished. Pemberton would burn them out of spite, and we'd both be dead within weeks anyway. Not if we time it right, James countered. Build a case quietly. Gather witnesses. Then confront him with the choice, hand over the plants, or face trial for murder. He'd call our bluff, Arabella said. He knows we need those orchids more than we need justice. Then we make it real, not a bluff. James turned to Sebastian. You said your father kept journals. Detailed records. That's evidence of 48 murders, 49 if we count Dr. Ashford himself. Sebastian went very still. You think Pemberton killed my father? I think it's awfully convenient that a man planning to destroy his own research suddenly dies of heart failure. And I think if we exhumed the body and ran tests. No, Sebastian's voice was flat. I won't desecrate my father's grave, even for this. Then we find another way to prove it. James pulled out a small notebook, already making lists. The orphanage. There must be records of which children were adopted versus which actually were placed in homes. We find the discrepancies. That was 20 years ago, Arabella interrupted. The orphanage burned down 10 years ago. Convenient timing, I'm sure. Nothing is ever completely destroyed. Records get copied, sent to church parishes, filed with local magistrates. James's eyes lit with the fervor of a man who'd found his purpose. Give me 3 days. I'm sure I'll find something we can use. We don't have 3 days to spare, Sebastian said. Then I'll work faster. James said, heading for the door, already mentally composing his search strategy. Cordelia, take Arabella inside. Get her warm and fed. Sebastian, I need access to whatever journals survived the fire. Sebastian huffed in disagreement, but James pressed on. I know the clock is ticking. Just trust me. He paused at the doorway. You two aren't the only ones who can sacrifice for the people they care about. When he was gone, Cordelia took Arabella's arm firmly. Come. You're going to catch your death standing in this ruin. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on anyone. Inside, the manor was in controlled chaos. Servants cleaning soot, repairing smoke damage, whispering about the fire. Arabella let Cordelia lead her to her chambers, let a bath be drawn, let herself be cared for because she was too tired to protest. But as she sank into the hot water, watching the ash swirl and dissipate, her mind was still racing. 15 days. 1 cure. 2 people. Pemberton's choice or certain death. There was a soft knock at the door. It's me, Sebastian called. Are you decent? Relatively, she answered. Come in. He entered, having cleaned up himself but still looking haunted. In his hand was a leather journal she didn't recognize. I lied, he said without preamble. Earlier, when you asked if I was hiding something. Arabella's heart sank. What did you hide? This. He held up the journal. I found it 3 days before you broke into my conservatory. It's my father's final notebook. the one he kept separate from all the others. Why didn't you show me? Because it contains his hypothesis about why we survived when the others didn't. Sebastian's hands trembled slightly. He believed we were genetically compatible, and that our combined genetic material might produce offspring with natural immunity to the poison. The bathwater suddenly felt too hot. He wanted us to breed. She completed. Yes. Like prize horses. Sebastian's voice was bitter. He documented everything. Our blood types, our physiological responses, even our temperamental similarities. He was planning a multi-generational study. Arabella felt sick. The engagement, our arrangement, was exactly what he intended all along. I proposed marriage to save you, but in doing so, I fulfilled his experimental design perfectly. Sebastian set the journal on her vanity, not looking at her. I couldn't tell you. Couldn't bear to see you realize that even my redemption was tainted by his sins. So you kept it secret instead, letting me think that this was all our choice when it was his plan from the beginning. No. Sebastian finally met her eyes. It was his plan, but it's our choice. The fact that he anticipated something doesn't mean we're bound by it. We can choose differently. Can we really? Arabella stood, wrapping herself in a robe, suddenly needing the armor of clothing. Because it seems like every path leads back to his design. We marry, we fulfill his experiment. One of us takes the cure, the other dies. We fulfill his data set. We both refuse treatment and die. We still fulfill his hypothesis about the poison's effectiveness. Then how about we choose a fourth path? One he didn't anticipate. There is no fourth path. The words came out louder than she intended, echoing off the bathroom tiles. Sebastian flinched but held his ground. Then we make one, he said quietly. Together. How so? And with what? We have no cure, no leverage, no time. We have each other. We have James digging for evidence. We have 15 days to do something impossible. He crossed to her, taking her hands. My father saw us as specimens. Pemberton sees us as data points. But we're not. We're people who fell in love in the worst possible circumstances, who found each other across 20 years of manufactured fate, who refused to let dead men dictate our future. Love doesn't cure poison, Sebastian. No, he agreed. But it gives us a reason to fight instead of surrender. His grip tightened. So here's what we do. We go to Pemberton tomorrow. We negotiate. And while we're negotiating, James is building a case. And while James is building a case, we'll search for any scrap of information that might help us delay the activation. And if all of that fails, his voice cracked. If all of that fails, then yes, we make the impossible choice. But not today. Not while we still have 15 days to rage against the dying of the light. Arabella looked at their joined hands, hers with violet traces climbing toward her elbows now. His with fainter lines that would eventually kill him too. Two poisoned people refusing to accept their fate. It was insane. Futile. A gesture of defiance against mathematics, biology, and time itself. All right, she said. We fight. Sebastian's smile was fierce and grateful and heartbreaking. Yeah, we fight. He leaned forward, and for a moment Arabella thought he might kiss her, but instead he pressed his forehead to hers, sharing breath and determination and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Whatever happens, he whispered, I'm glad it was you. I'm glad my father's sins brought me someone worth saving. Worth dying for, you mean? Same thing. Outside, the ruined conservatory continued to smoke. Pemberton sat in his study, confident in his control. And the clock ticked down, indifferent to love, rage, or desperate gambles. 14 days, 23 hours, and counting. The next morning, Arabella and Sebastian prepared for war disguised as a social call. She wore her finest day dress, deep green silk that made her look healthy despite the exhaustion. And he wore the ducal authority like armor. Remember, Sebastian said as their carriage approached Pemberton House. "We're here to negotiate, not to grovel. And if he refuses to negotiate, then we deploy contingency plans." He held up a small vial of clear liquid. "This is a fast-acting sedative. If things go badly, I'll need you to distract him while I dose his tea." Arabella stared at the vial. "You're planning to drug and kidnap a lord." "I'm planning to do whatever it takes." His eyes met hers, dark and resolute. "No limits. No lines I won't cross. Not anymore." The carriage stopped. Morrison answered the door with his usual impassive expression. "Lord Pemberton is expecting you in the greenhouse," he said. "Follow me." He didn't say the study, but the greenhouse, where the orchids were. Arabella and Sebastian exchanged glances as they followed Morrison through the manor. This was either a show of good faith or an elaborate taunt. The greenhouse was smaller than Sebastian's conservatory had been, but meticulously maintained. And there, arranged on a central table like crown jewels, were the 6 Dendrobium purpureum nocturne plants. Blooming, healthy, maddeningly close. Pemberton stood beside them, wearing gardening gloves and a pleasant smile. "Welcome," he said. "I thought we should have this conversation somewhere honest. No pretense, no games. Just the truth, and the choices it demands." "We're here to negotiate terms," Sebastian said coldly. "How refreshing." Pemberton gestured at the orchids. "Then let's be clear about what we're negotiating for. These plants represent the only cure to a poison I helped create. A poison currently killing the woman you love and the body you inhabit. A matter of supply and demand, your grace. I have all the supply, and you have all the demand." "Name your price," Arabella said. "Oh, but I already did. 2 nights ago, in my study." Pemberton's smile widened. "I told you the choice. I'm simply waiting for your answer." "That wasn't a choice. That was extortion." Pemberton shrugged. "Call it what you like. The terms remain the same." He stroked one of the orchid petals. "1 cure. 2 dying people. Someone has to choose who lives and who dies." Sebastian pulled out the vial of sedative, and Pemberton laughed. "You can't be serious. You drug me, steal the plants, and then what? You still need weeks to prepare the extract. You still need my knowledge of the preparation process. You still need," he paused, his smile taking on a cruel edge. "Oh, you don't know." "Know what?" Arabella asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Pemberton moved to a locked cabinet and withdrew a slim folder. "Edmund gave me something before he died. Insurance, he called it. His final petty revenge for my ending our partnership prematurely." He opened the folder, revealing a single page of dense chemical formulas. "The antidote requires more than just the orchid extract," Pemberton said. "It requires a catalyst. A compound Edmund synthesized himself and never wrote down the formula for. Except here, in this document, which he gave to me with instructions to destroy it if anything happened to him." "You're lying," Sebastian said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Then by all means, steal the orchids. Prepare the extract using your father's notes. See what happens when you inject it without the catalyst." Pemberton's expression turned almost pitying. "It'll kill you in hours instead of days. Edmund's final gift, an antidote that's also a poison unless you know the secret." Arabella felt the trap close around them with mathematical precision. Even if they stole the plants, even if they prepared the extract, without that formula they had nothing. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I told you. A choice." Pemberton set down the folder. "But I'll sweeten the deal. Make your decision by sunset tomorrow, and I'll throw in the catalyst formula. Free of charge. Consider it my contribution to true love. And if we refuse to choose, then in 15 days, Arabella dies. Then in 5 years, Sebastian dies. And these beautiful orchids get shipped to a botanical garden in Madagascar, where they'll live out their days in obscurity. Edmund's research dies with you. The perfect failure to cap off a failed experiment." He was insane. Completely, calmly insane. But he held all the power. Sunset tomorrow, Pemberton repeated. Choose life or choose love. But choose. As Morrison escorted them out, Arabella's mind was already racing. 14 days. One cure. And an impossible choice. Somewhere in London, James Whitmore was searching for evidence they could use as leverage. Evidence that might arrive too late to matter. The carriage ride back to Greyston was silent. What was there to say? They'd walked into Pemberton's trap with their eyes open, and now the jaws were closing. We'll find the catalyst formula another way, Sebastian said finally. Break into his house, search his papers. He'll have it protected. Probably on his person. Then he stopped, out of options. Arabella, I can't watch you die. I just can't. Then don't watch. She turned to him, her decision crystallizing into terrible clarity. Take the cure. Live. And find a way to make all of this mean something. I would do no such thing. Sebastian, she started, but he interrupted her. No. His voice broke. I would rather die with you than live without you. If that makes me selfish, so be it. But I will not be the survivor who spends the rest of his years knowing I chose my life over yours. Then we're at an impasse. Good. At least we're together in it. The carriage pulled up to Greyston Manor, where James was waiting on the steps, waving papers urgently. I found something, he called before they'd even disembarked. Something that changes everything. They rushed inside, following James to the study. He spread documents across the desk, old papers, faded ink, official seals. The orphanage records were destroyed, but the church kept copies, James explained rapidly. And I found this. He pointed to a ledger entry. Subject V23. Male child, age 8. Adopted by Lord and Lady Ashford, January 1809. Sebastian leaned closer. That's me. I know I was adopted. But look at the notation beside it. James's finger tapped an almost illegible scrawl. Payment received from Lord P for placement. Priority subject, genetic match to V17. Pemberton paid to have me adopted, Sebastian said slowly. He arranged for my father to take me in. Not just arranged. Orchestrated. James pulled out another document. This is your birth record from the orphanage. Your mother's name is listed as Sarah Thornwell. The room went silent. Arabella heard the words but couldn't process them. That's impossible. Your mother died in childbirth when you were born, correct? James looked at her gently. What if she didn't? What if she had twins? What if someone separated you at birth and sent one to the orphanage while keeping the other? We're siblings, Sebastian breathed. Genetically compatible, James continued. Same blood type, similar physiological responses, naturally matched for Edmund's experiments. He didn't find two compatible subjects. Pemberton gave him two subjects who were already related. Arabella's world tilted. Every assumption, every choice, every feeling, all of it recontextualized in an instant. The engagement, she whispered. Oh God. We almost. Nothing happened, Sebastian said quickly, his face pale. We did nothing, we never. But we felt, Arabella said, not able to finish the sentence. Manufactured connection, James said quietly. Edmund's notes probably mentioned you were siblings. Probably counted on you not knowing, on the genetic familiarity reading as attraction instead of recognition. Sebastian backed away from the desk, from the papers, from the truth. This doesn't change anything. We're still, actually, it changes everything. James's expression turned fierce. Because this proves Pemberton didn't just fund experiments. He trafficked children, separated siblings, falsified official records. These are crimes with no statute of limitations. So what? Arabella's voice came out hollow. We turn him in, he burns the orchids out of spite, and we both die as morally superior corpses. Or, James paused dramatically. We use this to force his hand. Tonight. Before he has time to react. How? Sebastian asked. James smiled. With a very public scandal at the Harrington Ball, where Lord Pemberton would be in attendance, surrounded by society's elite, with no opportunity to destroy evidence or flee. You want to expose him publicly, Sebastian said. Ruin him socially and legally. I want to give him one choice: hand over the orchids and the catalyst formula, or face immediate arrest for child trafficking and falsifying official documents. James gathered the papers carefully. The orchids are at his house. We have people positioned to seize them the moment he's arrested. He either cooperates or loses everything. It was brilliant, reckless, dangerous. And if he calls our bluff? Arabella asked. Then he goes to prison, and we search his house until we find that formula. James met her eyes. I know it's not guaranteed, but it's better odds than Pemberton's impossible choice. Sebastian and Arabella looked at each other, siblings, not lovers, bound by blood and poison and a dead man's twisted experiment. One more gamble, Sebastian said. One more fight, Arabella agreed. They had until sunset tomorrow. But tonight, at the Harrington Ball, they would make their stand. And Pemberton would learn that even laboratory subjects could bite back. The Harrington Ball glittered with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off jewels and champagne glasses. London's elite swirled in practiced patterns of waltz and gossip, completely unaware that beneath the veneer of civility, a reckoning was about to unfold. Arabella stood at the entrance beside Sebastian, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Not as his fiancée, that fiction had died with the revelation of their true relationship, but as his sister. The word still felt strange, wrong, and right simultaneously. All those moments of connection, of recognition, reframed as genetic memory instead of romantic destiny. He's here, Sebastian murmured, by the terrace doors, talking to the Duke of Somerset. Pemberton looked entirely at ease, laughing at some jest, his champagne glass catching the light. A man without a care in the world. He hadn't seen them yet. Is James in position? Arabella asked. With 3 magistrates and the documentation. The moment we give the signal, Sebastian's jaw tightened. Are you certain about this? Once we start, there's no going back. There was never any going back. Not from the moment your father put poison in our veins. Arabella adjusted her gloves, hiding the violet traces that now climbed past her elbows. 13 days left. She could feel time running out like sand through an hourglass. Let's end this. They moved through the crowd with purpose, society parting before the Duke of Greyston and his mysterious ward. Whispers followed them. The engagement had been called off suddenly, no explanation given. How scandalous, how intriguing. Pemberton saw them approaching. His smile didn't falter, but something shifted in his eyes. Calculation. Wariness. Your Grace. Arabella. What a pleasant surprise. He excused himself from the Duke of Somerset smoothly. I wasn't expecting to see you here tonight. I thought you'd be home, contemplating your choice. We've made our choice, Sebastian said quietly. And you're not going to like it. Pemberton's eyebrow arched. Do tell. Not here. Arabella glanced meaningfully at the crowded ballroom. The library. Unless you prefer we have this conversation in front of 300 witnesses. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across Pemberton's face. Then he nodded graciously, as if they'd merely suggested a private chat about the weather. The library it is. Lead the way. The Harrington Library was smaller than Sebastian's, lined with books that looked more decorative than read. Sebastian locked the door behind them while Arabella drew the curtains. When they turned, Pemberton was already pouring himself a brandy, completely unruffled. So, he said, settling into a leather chair. What dramatic revelation have you uncovered? What leverage do you think gives you negotiating power? This. Sebastian laid the documents on the desk. Birth records, payment ledgers, church registries. You didn't just fund experiments. You trafficked children, falsified official records. separated siblings and sold them to a man you knew would torture them. Pemberton glanced at the papers without interest. Ancient history. No one cares about orphans from 20 years ago. The law cares. These documents prove child trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. James Whitmore stepped out from behind a bookshelf where he'd been waiting. I have 3 magistrates outside who would love to discuss the specifics. Now Pemberton's composure cracked, just slightly. Whitmore, I should have known you'd involve yourself in this melodrama. I prefer to think of it as justice. James set a warrant on the desk. You have 2 choices, Pemberton. Hand over the orchids and the catalyst formula willingly, or I present this evidence to the magistrates right now and you're arrested for trafficking, fraud, and accessory to murder. And if I'm arrested, the orchids are seized as evidence, locked away in some government warehouse while your trial drags on for years. Pemberton smiled. Meanwhile, Arabella dies in 13 days. Congratulations on your moral victory. The orchids would be released to Sebastian as Edmund Ashford's legitimate heir, James countered, along with all research materials found in your possession. Is that so? And how long would that take? Weeks? Months? Pemberton leaned forward. You're bluffing, Whitmore. You need those plants immediately, and you know it. Then we have a mutually assured destruction scenario, Sebastian said coldly. You go to prison and lose everything. We die but take you down with us. Unless you cooperate. Cooperate. Pemberton tasted the word. You mean surrender. Give you the cure, the formula, everything, and trust that you won't turn me in any way out of spite. We'll sign a document, James said. Legal protection from prosecution in exchange for the orchids and full cooperation. You walk away free, and they get to live. And I'm supposed to believe you'll honor that. You're supposed to believe we're desperate enough to mean it. Arabella stepped forward, pulling off her gloves. The violet traces were unmistakable now, climbing toward her shoulders like poisonous vines. Look at me, Pemberton. Really look. I'm dying. Every hour, the poison spreads further. In 13 days, it reaches my heart and I die screaming. That's what your research created. That's what you're so proud of. Something flickered in Pemberton's expression. Not quite guilt, but close. Recognition, perhaps, of consequences made flesh. You want to see how the experiment ends, Arabella continued, her voice steady despite the tremors starting in her hands. Fine. Here's your data point. I choose life. I choose to survive. But not by sacrificing my brother. She glanced at Sebastian. Not when there might be another way. There is no other way, Pemberton said, but he sounded less certain. Then help us find one. Sebastian moved to stand beside Arabella, presenting a united front. You helped create this poison. You understand its mechanisms. Work with us. Help us synthesize enough cure for both of us, or find a way to delay the activation. Or admit you never actually cared about the science, Arabella finished. Admit this was always about power and control and watching people suffer. Prove you're exactly the monster we think you are. The challenge hung in the air. Outside, music drifted from the ballroom, waltz continuing, champagne flowing, oblivious nobility dancing while lives hung in the balance. Pemberton set down his brandy glass with deliberate care. You're right, he said quietly. I am a monster. I funded experiments on children because I wanted to create the perfect murder weapon. I separated you two because Edmund said your combined genetics were ideal for the compound. I killed Edmund when he developed a conscience because I'd invested too much to walk away. He stood, straightening his cuffs. But you're wrong about one thing. What's that? Sebastian asked. I do care about the science. That's why I kept such meticulous records. Why I preserved Edmund's research when I could have destroyed it. Pemberton moved to the window, gazing out at the glittering ballroom beyond. And why I know something neither of you have figured out yet. Which is? Arabella probed. The activation isn't inevitable. It's triggered by a specific stress hormone that floods the system on the 25th birthday, a biological marker of full maturity. He turned back to face them. Edmund theorized that if you could suppress that hormone surge, you could delay activation indefinitely. He was working on a suppressant when I killed him. Arabella's heart hammered. Where's the research? Destroyed. Edmund burned his notes the day before he died. Said he wouldn't let me have it. Then it's useless information, Sebastian said bitterly. Not entirely. I remember the base compound he was using. Didn't understand the full synthesis, but I know where he started. Pemberton pulled a small notebook from his jacket. I kept my own notes. Insurance, in case I ever needed leverage. He tossed the notebook onto the desk. Sebastian grabbed it, flipping through pages of chemical formulas and annotations. This is it. It's incomplete, but the foundation is here. His eyes widened. With this and my father's journals, I might be able to reconstruct the suppressant. Might, Pemberton emphasized. No guarantees. Edmund never completed his work. You'd be guessing, experimenting, risking accelerating the poison instead of delaying it. How long would it take? Arabella asked. Sebastian scanned the notes, his mind clearly racing through calculations. To synthesize a testable version? 4 days. Maybe 5. To verify it works without killing you? No idea. I have 13 days. That's enough time to try. And if it fails? If the suppressant doesn't work or makes things worse? Then we're no worse off than we are now. Arabella turned to Pemberton. Why are you telling us this? Why help? Pemberton was silent for a long moment, because Edmund's last words before he died weren't tell them the truth. They were save my children. His expression twisted with something that might have been regret. I funded his work, pushed him to perfect the poison, but I never intended for it to be used on his own son. That was Edmund's guilt manifesting as misguided protection. If Sebastian was poisoned too, he'd understand the urgency of the work. How noble, Sebastian said acidly. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm stating facts. Pemberton picked up his brandy again, draining it. You want the orchids? Take them. The formula for the catalyst? It's in my safe at home. Combination is Edmund's death date reversed. Take all of it and do what you will. In exchange for what? James asked suspiciously. In exchange for nothing. Consider it a failed experiment yielding unexpected results. Pemberton moved toward the door, then paused. But if you do manage to create the suppressant, if you do find a way to delay the poison indefinitely, I want the formula. Not for profit. For the record. So Edmund's final work isn't completely lost. You want us to give you a cure after everything you've done. Arabella couldn't believe it. I want you to prove that some good came from all this suffering. That Edmund's science, twisted as it was, produced something that saves lives instead of ending them. Pemberton unlocked the door. The orchids will be delivered to Greyston Manor within the hour. The formula by morning. After that, you're on your own. He left without waiting for a response, disappearing into the crowd beyond. The 4 of them stood in stunned silence. Is this real? Arabella finally asked. Or another manipulation? It's real, James said slowly. His giving up. Actually surrendering. Or setting a trap, Sebastian countered. But he was already studying the notebook, his scientific mind latching onto the formulas. These notes, they're genuine. My father's handwriting in the margins, Pemberton's annotations. This is real research. So we have a plan, Arabella said. Synthesize the suppressant. Test it. Hope it works. And if it doesn't work in time, we still have the orchids for the cure, Sebastian added. But Arabella, you need to understand, we're talking about injecting an experimental compound into your body based on incomplete research. The risks are acceptable compared to certain death. Arabella completed with determination. Her hands were shaking harder now, the tremors spreading up her arms. I'm not getting better, Sebastian. Every day, the poison spreads further. We try the suppressant. And if we're wrong, at least we tried everything. James cleared his throat. I hate to be practical, but we should verify Pemberton's claims before we inject anyone with anything. Let me go to his house, confirm the orchids and formula are there. We don't have time for caution, Sebastian interrupted. Every hour we waste is an hour closer to activation. We start synthesizing the suppressant tonight. If the orchids arrive as promised, we continue. If they don't, we confront Pemberton with the full force of the law. It was a gamble. But then, everything had been a gamble since the moment Arabella had broken into Sebastian's conservatory. They left the ball separately to avoid suspicion, reconvening at Greyston Manor just as an unmarked carriage delivered 6 carefully wrapped orchid plants and a sealed letter. Sebastian tore it open. Inside was a combination, 14-18-09, Edmund Ashford's death date reversed, and a note in Pemberton's precise handwriting: the suppressant requires a catalyst of its own. The orchid extract. You'll need to choose, use the plants for the cure, or use them for the suppressant. Not enough for both. Choose wisely. Arabella felt the trap close even as she'd thought they'd escaped it. One set of resources. 2 possible solutions. The same impossible choice, just reframed. He played us, she breathed. No. Sebastian's jaw set with determination. He gave us options. The suppressant might work with a smaller amount of extract. If I modify the ratios and reduce the dosage, it might yield results. You're talking about diluting an already experimental treatment based on incomplete research. James looked between them. This is madness. This is all we have. Sebastian was already moving toward the laboratory, the notebook clutched in his hand. Arabella, I need your current vitals. Blood pressure, heart rate, temperature. James, help me set up the distillation equipment. Cordelia, he paused, seeing her in the doorway. When did you arrive? About 10 minutes ago. Long enough to hear everything. Cordelia's expression was fierce. And before you try to send me away, I'm staying. Bella needs someone who isn't emotionally compromised and scientifically obsessed. She needs a friend. Despite everything, Arabella felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we've saved your life. Cordelia rolled up her sleeves. Now what can I do to help? The next 4 days blurred into a nightmare of chemistry and desperation. Sebastian worked 18-hour stretches, synthesizing compounds, testing reactions, recalculating ratios. The orchid extract was precious. He couldn't waste a single drop on failed experiments. Arabella grew weaker. The tremors became constant. The violet traces spread across her chest, creeping toward her heart. She could feel the poison like ice in her veins, crystallizing slowly but inexorably. 9 days left. 8. 7. On the 4th night, Sebastian emerged from the laboratory with a vial of pale purple liquid. This is it, he said quietly. The suppressant. Or what I think is the suppressant based on my father's incomplete research and Pemberton's notes and my own desperate guesses. Arabella looked at the vial. Such a small thing to contain so much hope and terror. What happens when you inject it? If it works, your body's stress response is suppressed. The activation trigger never fires. The poison remains dormant indefinitely, buying us time to synthesize a proper cure from the remaining orchid extract. And if it doesn't work? Sebastian's silence was answer enough. Or it could accelerate the poison, Arabella finished for him. Kill me in hours instead of days. Yes. What's the probability of success? Based on the theoretical framework? 60%. Maybe 70. Sebastian set the vial down carefully. But Arabella, those numbers are meaningless. We're in completely uncharted territory. This could save you or kill you, and I won't know which until you inject it and see what happens. Arabella picked up the vial, watching the liquid catch the light. 7 days until her birthday. 7 days until the poison activated fully and she died screaming. Do it. We should wait. Run more tests, verify the compound stability. Sebastian. She met his eyes, seeing her own fear reflected there. I'm tired of waiting. Tired of being someone's experimental subject, someone's data point. I want to choose. For once, I want to choose my own fate. Then choose the cure. We have enough orchid extract left for a full treatment. It'll take 2 weeks to prepare properly, but if we delay your birthday somehow, induce a coma or... No. Arabella's decision crystallized with absolute clarity. If this suppressant works, we can use the remaining extract to cure you. Both of us survive. If it doesn't work, at least you have enough for your own cure. Either way, someone lives. That's not, you can't just, Sebastian's composure cracked. Arabella, I can't lose you. Not now. Not when I've just found you. You found a sister. And sisters protect each other. She handed him the vial. Inject me. That's an order from your elder sibling. By 4 minutes, according to the birth records. 4 minutes counts. Arabella managed a shaky smile. Besides, someone needs to survive to make sure Pemberton doesn't start another experiment. That's your job now. Sebastian stared at the vial in his hand, then at her. There's a third option. What? We split the suppressant. Half dose each. It might not fully suppress the activation, but it could delay it long enough to synthesize more. Buy us both time. Your own research says partial doses are dangerous. Unpredictable. Yes. But so is injecting you with an experimental compound based on incomplete data. He was already drawing up 2 syringes, dividing the precious liquid. We've been making impossible choices since the beginning. At least this way, we make them together. Arabella wanted to argue, to protest that one of them should survive with certainty rather than both risking death. But looking at Sebastian's face, her brother's face, though the words still felt strange, she understood. They'd been test subjects their entire lives. Separated at birth, poisoned as children, manipulated into false attraction, given impossible choices. For once, they could choose to stand together. All right, she said. Together. James and Cordelia were summoned to witness. Sebastian explained the risks, the probabilities, the complete absence of any guarantee. They both protested, argued, pleaded for more caution. But in the end, they held Arabella's and Sebastian's hands as the syringes were prepared. If this works, Sebastian said quietly, we'll have bought ourselves approximately 6 months before the poison progresses to critical stages again. That's 6 months to perfect a cure, to synthesize more suppressant, to find a permanent solution. And if it doesn't work? Cordelia asked. Then we'll know within 6 hours. The poison will either stabilize or accelerate. There's no middle ground. 6 hours. Arabella had waited 20 years for answers. She could wait 6 more hours. Sebastian administered his own injection first, the needle sliding into his vein with practiced precision. Then he turned to Arabella, his hand steady despite the fear in his eyes. Last chance to change your mind, he said. Not a chance. She held out her arm, violet traces vivid against pale skin. Do it. The needle pierced her vein. The suppressant flowed into her bloodstream, cool and strange. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Arabella's vision whited out with pain. It felt like ice and fire simultaneously, like every nerve in her body was being rewritten. She heard herself scream, distantly, as if from very far away. Hands held her down, Cordelia's, James's, while Sebastian monitored her vitals with desperate focus. Heart rate spiking, 180, 190, 200. Temperature dropping, below 90. She's seizing. The world fractured into moments. Pain. Darkness. Cordelia's voice calling her name. Sebastian's hands on her wrist, checking her pulse. The taste of copper in her mouth. And then, gradually, the pain began to recede. Arabella opened her eyes to find herself on the laboratory floor, Cordelia cradling her head, tears streaming down her friend's face. "You're alive," Cordelia sobbed. "Oh God, you're alive." "Sebastian," Arabella tried to sit up, but her body felt like lead. "Here." He was sitting against the wall, his face pale but conscious. "I'm here. The seizure only lasted 3 minutes for me. You were out for 12. Did it work?" Sebastian held up his arm. The violet traces that had been climbing toward his heart had stopped. Frozen in place, neither advancing nor retreating. He touched Arabella's shoulder gently, and she looked down to see the same thing, the poison, suspended. "We bought time," he said quietly. 6 months. Maybe more if we're lucky. Then we use it." Arabella let Cordelia help her sit up, her body shaking with exhaustion. "We perfect the cure. We end this." "We end this," Sebastian agreed. Over the next 6 months, Greyston Manor became a research facility. Sebastian worked tirelessly, using the remaining orchid extract to synthesize a stable cure. Arabella assisted when she was strong enough, learning chemistry and biology, becoming a partner in her own salvation. James pursued the legal case against Pemberton quietly, building an airtight prosecution. But strangely, Pemberton didn't flee or interfere. He simply waited, as if genuinely curious to see if they would succeed. Cordelia kept them human, forcing them to eat, sleep, remember there was a world beyond the laboratory. And slowly, impossibly, the cure took shape. It wasn't perfect. The first iteration failed. The second caused severe side effects. But the third, synthesized with painstaking care over 4 months, showed promise. "This is it," Sebastian said, holding up a vial of clear liquid. "The complete cure. Derived from the orchid extract, catalyzed properly, calibrated to our specific physiology. If my calculations are correct, this will neutralize the poison entirely." "And if your calculations are wrong?" Arabella asked. "Then we've wasted 6 months and we're back where we started." He met her eyes. "But I don't think I'm wrong. The compound is stable. The ratios are perfect. This should work." "Should." "Will," he corrected firmly. "This will work." They chose to administer the cure on the anniversary of the night Arabella had broken into Sebastian's conservatory. A year ago, she'd been a desperate woman stealing plants to survive. Now she was a scientist in her own right, about to cure the poison that had defined her entire existence. The injection was anticlimactic. No pain, no seizures. Just a moment of coolness spreading through her veins, and then nothing. For 3 days, they waited. And on the 3rd day, Arabella woke to find the violet traces on her skin fading. Not frozen, fading. Disappearing like morning frost under sunlight. Sebastian's traces were receding too, his body accepting the cure, neutralizing 20 years of poison. "We did it," Arabella whispered, staring at her clear, unmarked wrist. "We actually did it." "We did it," Sebastian confirmed, and there were tears on his face. "We're free." They went to Pemberton together, found him in his study, older and somehow smaller than Arabella remembered. He looked up from his papers as they entered, unsurprised. "So the experiment succeeded," he said quietly. "Both subjects cured. Edmund would be pleased." "We're not subjects," Arabella said. "We're people. We have names, lives, futures that aren't defined by your research." "I know." Pemberton stood, moving to a locked cabinet. From it, he withdrew a thick portfolio. Edmund's complete research. Everything he compiled over 20 years. I was supposed to destroy it, but I couldn't. Science should never be destroyed, even when it's born from atrocity. He handed the portfolio to Sebastian. "Use it. Make something good from something terrible. That's all I ask." "What about you?" Sebastian asked. "James has enough evidence to prosecute. You'll go to prison for the rest of your life." "I know. I've known since you found the birth records." Pemberton smiled tiredly. "I'm 73 years old. Prison or freedom, I'll be dead within the decade. At least this way, I die knowing the science survived." The science that killed 48 children, Arabella said coldly. Yes, that science. Pemberton met her eyes. I won't ask for forgiveness. Won't insult you by claiming I've changed. I'm a monster, and monsters don't get redemption arcs. But maybe the work, twisted as it was, can save future lives instead of ending them. It wasn't justice. Wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it was something. They left Pemberton to his fate. James prosecuted the case, and Pemberton went to prison without protest. The trial was quiet, kept out of the papers through careful legal maneuvering. No need to expose the victims to public scrutiny. Sebastian used Edmund's research to develop a treatment for rare blood disorders, publishing under a pseudonym to avoid association with his father's crimes. The Dendrobium purpureum nocturne orchids were successfully cultivated and distributed to botanical gardens, no longer a monopolized cure but a source of potential healing. Arabella turned Greyston Manor into a home for orphans, children who would never be subjects or experiments, just children. She and Sebastian ran it together, siblings united by trauma and survival. And Cordelia married James Whitmore in a ceremony at Greyston's chapel, where two former test subjects stood as witnesses and celebrated love that had nothing to do with genetic compatibility or manufactured destiny. 3 years after that night in the conservatory, Arabella stood in the orchid room they'd rebuilt. The plants bloomed purple and beautiful, no longer symbols of death but of defiance, of survivors who'd refused to let dead men dictate their fate. Sebastian found her there, carrying a letter. It's from Pemberton. He died last night. Pneumonia. Arabella took the letter, reading the final words of the man who'd poisoned her childhood. To the subjects who became people, who became scientists, who became something I never anticipated, human. Thank you for proving that even the worst experiments can yield unexpected hope. Destroy this research or use it to save lives. Either way, you've already saved yourselves. That's enough. P. She folded the letter carefully. Should we burn it? His research, his notes, all of it. Eventually, Sebastian said. But not today. Today, we remember that we survived. That 48 others didn't. That science without ethics is atrocity, but knowledge without application is waste. Very philosophical, brother. I have my moments. He offered his arm. Come. Cordelia's brought her new baby to visit, and James is insisting we teach him proper chess. Apparently, the child needs to understand strategy from birth. Arabella laughed, linking her arm through Sebastian's. As they walked through the manor that had once been a prison and was now a home, she felt the ghost of poison in her veins. Not the compound itself, long since cured, but the memory. Some scars never fully faded. Some traumas echoed for lifetimes. But they'd survived. Against mathematics and poison and impossible choices, they'd survived. And that was enough. That had to be enough. The orchids bloomed in their glass room, purple petals unfurling toward light. And somewhere in London, other orphans slept safely, never knowing how close they'd come to being someone else's experiment. The poison was cured. The monsters were dead or imprisoned. The survivors had chosen life, had chosen each other, had chosen to make meaning from suffering. And if that wasn't redemption, if it was simply survival dressed in hope's clothing, then survival would have to do. Because in the end, living was the ultimate defiance. Living was choosing your own story instead of being someone else's data point. Living was enough. If you loved this story of survival, impossible choices, and defying the odds, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more unique historical romance tales, and share this with someone who appreciates stories where love, whether romantic or familial, conquers even the darkest of experiments. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of Arabella and Sebastian's journey. Would you have made the same choices? What would you do with 6 months to live? We love hearing from you. Until next time, remember, you're never just a subject in someone else's story. You're the author of your own fate.